Hello everyone, and welcome back to calculus. So today is our 13th video, and this is about the product rule for derivatives. So the question that we're trying to ask today is, we know f's derivative and we know g's derivative, and we want to relate those to the derivative of the function f of x times g of x. A lot of students are going to do this first tempting but wrong thing. So a lot of people will guess that the derivative of f of x times g of x is just going to be taking f prime and multiplying it by g prime. This is super tempting. This is how sum and difference worked. Unfortunately, it's not quite that straightforward. And I can actually already show you an example of how we would know that this is wrong, just based on the little bit of derivatives that we know. So for example, I'm going to calculate these two things. So I'm going to calculate the derivative of my product 7x cubed times 10x. Then I'm separately going to calculate the derivative of 7x cubed and multiply that by the derivative of 10x. So if I'm doing this problem, I'm doing the derivative of 7x cubed times 10x. I should probably simplify my function down a little bit. So I'm really looking at the derivative of 70x to the fourth. And then I know by the constant multiple law, that's 70 times the derivative of x to the fourth. That's my constant multiple rule. And then the derivative of x to the fourth, that was that power rule, so we bring down the 4, so we're left with 70 times 4, and then the power we're left with is x cubed. So in other words, on this side of things, we're getting 280 x cubed. Okay. So that's what I would get if I took the derivative of the product. Now let's go ahead and multiply the product. So take the product of the derivatives. So over here, I would start with the derivative of 7x cubed. So that's 7 times the derivative of x cubed by the constant multiple rule. Times, this is, again, by the constant multiple rule, 10 times the derivative of x. Constant multiple rule. Okay, so then I need to know what the derivative of x cubed is. Well, that is 3x squared using the power rule. And I'm multiplying by 10 derivative of x. Remember, x is the same as x to the first, so I can also do the power rule there. So I'm multiplying by 10 times bring down my 1, and I'm left with x to the 0. And if we simplify all that out, I take my 7 times my 3 times my 10 times my 1, then I get 210 x squared is what I get on this side. So again, remember, our initial temptation would have been that these two things should have been equal. Taking the derivative of the product should be the same thing as taking the product of the derivatives. But we're getting very different answers for those two things. We're getting a cubic versus a quadratic and so forth. So this just is not working out. There must be something more going on. This should lead us to questioning, okay, how do I do this in general, let alone for this problem? And so what we're going to do in general is we need to go back and we need to look at the limit definition. So by definition, the derivative of f of x times g of x is equal to the limit as h goes to 0. We take our function at x plus h, so f of x plus h times g of x plus h. Then we're going to subtract off our function at x, so subtract off f of x times g of x and divide by h. So this is just the limit definition applied to this function f of x times g of x. And it's pretty messy, but I promise, or I claim, that at the end of the day, if you go through and you simplify out this limit, what you'd end up seeing is that the derivative of f of x times g of x should actually be, we'll take the derivative of f and multiply it by g. Then we'll add on f times the derivative of g. So it's not just f prime times g prime, it's f prime times g plus f times g prime. So a little bit more substance is coming out of this. There's a bit more complications to deal with. So this rule is called the product rule for derivatives because it deals with the product of functions. So let's go ahead and see an example of this in practice. So let me see my color code here. So I'm going to think of my two functions. Then since h prime of x is a product of two functions, again, I'm going to think of this as f and this as g. Then the product rule says that I should get f prime times g. So f prime is 1 over x. That was one of our basic derivatives, is the derivative of natural log is 1 over x. Times g of x, so times cosine of x. Plus, then I should do f of x, which was just natural log of x, times g prime of x. So the derivative of cosine, which we know is negative sine of x. So simplifying all that out, just a little bit cleaning it up, looks like we get cosine of x divided by x minus natural log of x times sine of x. So h prime of x is always equal to that amount. Okay. So I'll do one more example and then I'll let y'all work on an example. So if I want to do the product rule to calculate the derivative of 4x times root x, again, I'm going to think about this as taking the derivative of f of x times g of x. And so by the product rule, I should get f prime times g, f prime of x times g of x plus f times g prime. Okay, so let's fill those in. So f of x is 4 times x. So f prime of x, we should end up getting 4. And that's coming from, you do the constant multiple rule. So you take 4 out, and then you're just looking at 4 times the derivative of x. And you can do the power rule on x to bring down the 1. So you're doing the derivative of x to the first. So you get 1 times x to the 0. So again, let me write that out. F prime of x is the derivative of 4x. In other words, 4 times the derivative of x to the first. So 4 times 1x to the 0. Okay. Times, again, g of x I just filled in. That's just the square root of x. Plus, I get to just fill in f of x. That's 4x. And then g prime of x is a little bit more interesting. So for g prime of x, that's the derivative of the square root of x. I don't know anything about the square root of x, not directly, or at least not its derivative. But I do know something about it if I think about this a little differently. So instead of thinking about it as square root of x, I'm going to think of it as x to the 1/2. Because that's something that I know how to take the derivative of, and it means the same thing as square root of x. So then once you think of that, it's pretty easy to take the derivative using the power rule. rule, it says you get 1/2 x to the minus 1/2. So that's what g prime of x equals. And so simplifying all that down, I get 4 root x plus 2, and then x to the 1 times x to the minus 1/2, simplify into just x to the positive 1/2. In other words, another square root of x. So at the end of the day, I'm getting 6 root x. Okay. All right, so it is your turn to go ahead and try this out yourself. So using the product rule, I want you to find the derivative of 1/x times e to the x. So go ahead and pause here and try that problem. All right, hopefully you actually paused and tried the problem. So if you want to check yourself, what you should have gotten is x to the minus 2 times e to the x plus 1/x times e to the x. And that is the product rule.